Good morning, and welcome to another Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. I am your guest host, Michael Kernodle, and guess what? We have a special treat. What that treat is, you have the phenomenal, the Dr. Jeremy Carter, and he's going to give us his great topic today. For all my listeners, music storytelling with Jeremy Carter. And he wanted to remind me that this is for all musicians, whether you're a horn player, a percussionist, it does not matter. You are in the right place to hear an awesome story from the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jeremy Carter. But before we get started, we cannot do this without our sponsors. So I want to remind you to please check out the studio archives of past video sessions at clearwaterjazz.com education and outreach section. And that's brought to you by Blue Water Wealth Management at Stewart Partners and Duke Energy, as well as the Young Lion podcast available wherever you stream. And that's brought to you by our friends at Marine Max Clearwater. So just search Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions wherever you stream. I mean, what can I say about Jeremy Carter? I mean, if you've heard him, you know exactly who he is. I mean, he's one of the most sought after saxophonists around, not just in Tampa Bay. We call it Tampa Bay, but this man has played on stages across the country and around the world. He's traveled, he's recorded, and I'm telling you, he's a phenomenal musician and an awesome person, a great educator. He also works in the school system with us, with our program, My Journey with Jazz. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. With several sold out appearances, I mean, he's delivering to his listeners, and they just can't get enough. So one of his bands that I've heard recently is called the Jeremy Carter Rubber Band. And man, if you ever get a chance to check them out, whether it's at the Clearwater Jazz Holiday Wanderlust music series or out in the community, do not miss a chance to hear him. But today, you get to hear him live right here with Clearwater Jazz, all right? So one of his other sessions, if you ever go back in our past archives, is the beginner, intermediate, and advanced tenor sax sessions, and that was an awesome one as well. He's done some What I Love About series, some conversations with Sam Dillon. I'm talking Mike Tucker, Terrence Martin. I mean, you know those names, and he's phenomenal. So I'm going to stop talking right now because I know you are not here to hear me. You're here to hear the man. So, Jeremy Carter, the stage is all yours.
Michael, thank you so much, man. Thanks to all our partners over at Clearwater Jazz Holiday once again for having me and for all the great work that they do in the community. And as Michael was just mentioning, we've done some other some sessions. I've done some other sessions, as well as a number of Tampa Bay's top end musicians who also have contributed to the archives. I did some other sessions, which definitely are worth going back and checking out if you are a sax player specifically, and you want to just, there's a few different topics that I've touched on. I've had a few people reach out to me recently and try to do some virtual lessons and things like that. And just because of scheduling or whatever, we weren't able to hook up. But if you're listening, or for anybody that's out there and you're looking for some basic instruction and you're not able to get with somebody, there are some valuable gems there in the sessions that we've already done. One of which I'm going to be referencing to kind of tie in the topic that we're talking about today, which is musical storytelling, which I believe is a really important one. And I'll try not to talk too much. I'll try to kind of explain what it is I'm talking about and apply it to something a little more tangible in the way of song. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention a few reference sources for this topic. When I talk about musical storytelling, here, let me grab this. There's a few references that I always like to use in instruction, because there's some things that everybody learns differently, and I think that that's one of the important parts to not just your musical development. I mean, anytime you're learning anything, a different language, how to make a new dish, if you're woodworking, whatever it is, like your ability, the speed at which you learn and the way in which you learn is going to be different for everybody. So some of what we're talking about today is to maybe just try out some different methods of learning. That's part of it. But then, if this is something that you find useful, I think it can really change the way that you think about the way that you play and your art, as a whole. One of the sources that I was referencing is Kenny Werner's Effortless Mastery. I think this is a great book. He talks about a lot of things in here, and without going into it too in depth, there was just a couple pages that I marked, because I've read this book probably 8 or 9 times, and depending on what I am looking for, what I'm trying to get at the time, I always like, everybody has different proclivities, right, towards certain things or another, and that may change over time, right? So it's every time I read this book, I always gravitate to different points. And so just flipping through this morning in preparation for the session, there were a couple of things that just jumped out at me. I know I probably could have found 5, many other pages to focus in on, but the ones that I did tap onto or turn to, Kenny's talking about mastery of sound, right? Just that topic alone, like without going into it too much. Mastering the body, right? I'm not talking he's not talking about Lou Ferrigno or Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? The dexterity, the embouchure, the lung capacity. If you're a wind player, or if you're a pianist, like don't get that Bill Evans thing going on, hunching over the piano. Your fingers, make sure that they're nice and limber, and they want to be nimble. You want nimble fingers. So when he's talking about mastering the body, it pertains to like developing your body to put you in the best position to play your instrument correctly, right? So he's talking about some different concepts in that chapter, and then I just turned to a different chapter at random, right? And Kenny's talking about technical mastery creates freedom. Now that's a topic that's really striking. Like I said, without going into this stuff in too in depth, but just the different concepts that he covers and some of the different strategies that he uses to learn, to incorporate new information, to maybe revamp and recondition something that you've always used, something you always incorporate into your playing, right? Maybe you refurbish it, maybe you recondition it, maybe you mutate it a little bit, right? And so him talking about the technical mastery, creating freedom, right? All the technical stuff, the practicing, the etudes, studying of different harmonic structures, what that is going to do is give you the type of freedom that's necessary to just play in the moment, because that they call it playing an instrument, or in Spanish, tocar, right? To play, not a game, an instrument. Like it's a different type of play, right? And so on the next page, Kenny's talking about rhythm, right? Which is really, really important. That's I'm going to touch on that subject here in just a few minutes. That's part of a philosophy that I use. We're doing musical storytelling today, and the last session we did, I can't even remember what we called it, but I was talking about the rhythm is one of the core tenets in this whole philosophy that I try to keep in balance, no matter what the situation is and when I'm playing. Right. So another thing that Kenny talks about in here is to look at something look at something as being unfamiliar, not difficult. Right. Now there are pieces and there's phrases and little figures within music that may be technically challenging, but it's all a mindset. It's a mental obstacle that you're trying to overcome. And so instead of just simply looking at something, it is what it is, objectively. But if you look at it as unfamiliar instead of difficult, just the looking at it as difficult kind of creates these built-in obstacles or impediments to the growth. So just the way you look at it is going to be I think beneficial, and maybe speeding up or fast tracking the way that you absorb information, or the way that you process information, or the way you're able to incorporate some of these ideas and figures into your own playing. He also talks about mastering one thing first, mastering the ego. So this is a great book that really touches on, or in my mind, touches on the whole musical storytelling concept. Right. Another one that I referenced before was Free Play. Another great book. Just gives you a lot of conceptual ideas about just not just approaching the music, but just having your creativity be a conscious part, or a part, maybe not conscious and subconscious, actively and passively doing things that are artistic. You're not just like, okay, I'm picking up the instrument now I'll be an artist. It just kind of reframes the way that you think about your music and about the art and the way you approach it, and the freedom that's necessary or required to really tap into the music and give it what it's due, regardless of the situation. Like I play in so many, like if you're playing solo, whether you're playing in an ensemble, small, large ensemble, it doesn't matter. There are certain things that having the artistic freedom will allow you to just have a much better time, a more connected experience with your fellow musicians, right? Of course you have to do whatever the job requires, right? If you have to come in and you have to do a bunch of reading, there's not much artistic expression that you need to do within that if you're not soloing, right? But yeah, that's another topic for another day. Today we're talking about musical storytelling, right? The name of the last session we did kind of eludes me, but this is basically what we were talking about. I can't remember what we called it. But basically, whenever I'm playing, I have these 5 principles that, whether I either actively or passively consider keeping in balance, right? Because I practice these things, when I'm working on my stuff, right? So the first thing, in no particular order, this is just the way I wrote them right now. I write it again 5 minutes from now. There might be a different order, right? But the first thing is rhythm. The second thing is harmony. The second item in this list, right? So you have rhythm, abundantly important to what you're doing for the listener and the player, right? It has to have some substance of rhythm. Like, even if it's odd rhythm, there has to be something, like, even if you want it not to, it has some type of rhythmic value, right? It's ever present, right? So the next item on the list is harmony. Like there's different harmonic structures that are present, even if I'm playing the saxophone by myself, that I have to like, my job is a little bit harder because I can only play one note at a time. But there are harmonic structures that are present that I'm trying to articulate and get across to the listener, right? Which is completely different than the next item on the list, which is melody. The melody line, it is exactly what it says. The melody line, the melodic portion of the music is like it's just tied into everything. The cadence of the music, the song, the lyric, the verse, the melody. The melody line is crucially important in music. To play melodically, to play in a way that all the notes are connected and unified and not singularly present, right? The next thing that I have on my list is dynamics, right? That's important in anything. Whether if you're having a verbal conversation with somebody and you're in a library, right? Context is important. You're going to want to have a pianissimo, triple pianissimo. You're going to have a soft dynamic marking, right? If you're at the ball game and you're having that same conversation, you want to do triple F, right? So dynamics is really important. It adds the type of seasoning and color and character to your story that gives it real depth, right? And the last thing that I have on this list, and once again, this was I really can't remember what we called it, but this was the subject of our last session. These five ideas, this philosophy. I feel terrible. Like it's my thing. I can't even remember what it is. But the last thing on here is sound, which is crucially important. That's your delivery system. That's your vehicle for all these different things. Whether you're a drummer, a flautist, saxophone player, piano, bass, doesn't matter. Your sound is that is what's heard. That's the vehicle. That's the delivery system for all these other things we talked about. Rhythm is important. Melody is really important. Harmony is really, really important. Your dynamics are just as important as anything else, but your sound is the delivery system for all these things, right? And so that has to be, at the forefront of your practice when you're either putting your instrument together, no matter what piece of music that you're playing, the genre, your sound just has to be right. It should be something that you focus on, and it should be something that you seek to develop to create a personal sound. To be when you think about, I'll name the first couple guys that come to mind. Michael Brecker, right? His technical proficiency is just amazing. There are so many things about his playing that I just adore. But the one most recognizable thing that I would, is his sound. When he can play three notes. That's Brecker, right? Lester Young. That's Prez, right? Louis Armstrong, right? That's Louis, right? So your sound, I mean, not that not everyone is going to be Prez, not everyone is going to be Brecker, right? No, not everybody's going to be Louis Armstrong, but just to participate and engage in the music and honor the music properly, and to be a member of the music community, right? You want to have your own voice. It's something that's very tangible if treated correctly, right? It's like, dang, that's their sound, right? So these five things are crucially important. I mentioned them to kind of get into our topic for today, which is musical storytelling. I know that was a really, really long intro. So when you're talking about musical storytelling, it's exactly that. There's a couple ways that you can think about it, right? A movie is a story, right? A book, you're being told a story. You can be audibly told a story, around the campfire, right? But the one thing that is consistent among the stories that stick with you is that they have intrigue. They have the same way that we have these elements for music, for proper music composition, right? Or playing music, right? The same thing can be true if you're talking about musical storytelling. If you're thinking about this concept, right? You have characters, you have location, you have a theme, you have a character development. Like, right, you introduce a character, then you develop the character, right? You have scene changes, you have plot twists, right? And so I know it's kind of far out there, but this was something that I used in a lesson recently, and I don't know how well you can see this, but I'll talk about this a little bit just to kind of illustrate the point, right? So I was just talking about this in a lesson recently, and so I just used the idea, if you're talking about telling a story, right? Okay, what I'm doing is trying to turn notes, figuratively turn them into, like, for you to be able to associate notes, sounds, and ideas to life, to experiences. Now, just stick with me for a second, right? So now I represented here, if you were to think about a straight line, right? That could be represented as a whole note, right? A whole note of any kind, right? One note, how, no matter how you texture it, it could be soft, it could be loud, you can growl, it can have any kind of texture, right? And so I represented a triangle. Now, what could that be? It's already represented. Like, when you see a triangle on the page, you're automatically thinking major, but it also could represent a triad, right? And so, right. So then over here you have a circle, right? And so what could that be? Instead of just being like a whole note, if I see a circle, you can think about an idea that's circular, that just, like, it's a figure that continues to repeat. And then you have these rectangles that are in different sizes. So you could, like, think of like a pentatonic, like a 4-note figure as like a rectangle, but the sides are not, it's not a square, it's a rectangle, right? So there has to be some length within the figure. It has that type of symmetry to it, right? So just that idea right there of, like, thinking about notes as shapes, right? You're already, like, kind of out of this idea, this linear idea of just diatonic phrases and figures and lines, right? You're already beginning to explore conceptually outside of the norm, right? It's like, not when you think, if you're playing like a blues or whatever song, I don't know what tune you could, like, think of, but instead of, like, when you start the solo, okay, this song is in C, the first chord is C major, and so you're already thinking, like, what are the notes in C major, right? You're thinking about, like, a scale, you're thinking about in a linear fashion, right? And then when the chord changes, what are the notes in that scale? And so instead of doing that, and this is just for me, these are techniques and strategies that I use that kind of help me get out of the norm. Like, it's not as difficult if I'm already familiar. Like, if we're playing tunes and I already know the chord changes, then I don't really have to think about that. But if it's a situation where I'm going in and I may be playing some music, I may know the song, but the arranger has, like, a solo section for the tenor, but the chord changes are not like the song, right? So instead of, like, just looking at each chord individually, okay, you obviously have to have the understanding and knowledge of the chord of harmony, and you have to have some harmonic knowledge in order to kind of chuck it. But when you do come across these structures or these series of chords, you're not just looking at each one as like, okay, that's a F7, that's a G. G dominant, flat 9, flat 13, and that's this, right? Even when you're looking, like, you see the chords, you kind of already know, oh, like a flat 7, flat 9, or I mean a dominant flat 9, flat 13, that kind of has like a diminished thing to it, right? It's not quite diminished, but when you can just look at a chord symbol and you already know what it's supposed to sound like, then you've eliminated some of the impediments to just really being free, right? Because this stuff happens so quickly. You just don't have time to sit there and process the information, right? So if you're instead, you're using a lot of the same structures and figures, it's all relative, right? But you're not thinking about linear things. Like, so, okay, so I talked about shapes. You can maybe think about a dynamic marking or a feeling, an expression you want to try to get off. It may be a color, right? There's an element within jazz, we call it blues, right? So the first thing you think about when you hear, or one of the things you think about when you hear blues, right? Like sad, right? You think of like it has that thing, right? So blue, or the color blue, blues is a sound, it's a genre, it's an element of jazz, right? But the color blue itself has a thing, at least to me. I try to think this is what we're talking about. So if you already have shapes and you start to see colors, right, as musical sounds, and these are things that you're thinking about, right? Let me think of a song. I'll just think of a note. I'll just concert D, one note, right? And I'm thinking of like blue and red, right? This is what blue and red would sound like to me. Right? Little blue, little red, little fiery, little grit, But the thing is, like, I'm not thinking about, okay, we're just gonna, like, if it's bluesy, it has to be blues. No, I was just playing that was like a D7, right? And then I just start to work off of that. Like, you see some other shapes there. There's a concert A minor arpeggio right there. Right? So, like, that's what I'm thinking. Like, that's the approach. If I'm thinking like, okay, a little blue, a little red, right? Well, I don't know what would green sound like? What's green sound like in there? Right? Not red, not blue, little green. So musical storytelling, to do that effectively, I'm just kind of like, it's my philosophy, right? And to start with, I'm doing some very common and some core elements to doing that, right? Like the straight line. What's a straight line? Straight line. With, like, that was just a concert G, and I just thought of like a circle. So like a circle, this would be a good idea for a circle. This is like a pattern. I think it's like figures of like 4 and 5 or something like that. that's like that to me could like represent a circle, right? Right, and you have to hear this stuff, right? Well, yeah, I'm sorry for the pause. I almost got into a completely different subject altogether. We're just talking about musical storytelling today. I was thinking about a completely different topic. But so I mean, once you start to have your elements, or you think you can like visualize a line. Okay, now you're thinking about architecture, right? You have some of the building blocks. You have the foundation, right? You got a straight line. You got a circle. You got triads, right? You got rectangles, right? And now you're starting to add a little color, right? These are just the basics, right? And so if you were to think about, I'll keep it like really, really simple, like a drive, a nice drive on a day off. If you don't like driving, a nice walk or a bike ride, and you're just out, like you take any experience, like no matter how minute the details of that experience are, it doesn't always have to be like grandiose. The idea is to think about music in a way that's not like so bogged down by some of its tenets, scales, the modes and things like that. Ultimately, all of these things are important. You have to have that, but once you do, once you have all this information, once you have all these tools, these are strategies that I try to employ, in real time, like on the job. Like if I'm asked, the situations are always different. If ultimately, I want to be a listener. I use my ears first to just kind of assess what the music needs. What does the music need? What does the situation need? What is the demeanor? What is the posture of my fellow musicians? Like how would they potentially respond to something that is maybe like really overtly subdued or overtly like free? If I just came out and I just like the whole way over, I had like an hour, 2 hour drive to the gig, and I did nothing but listen to Ornette Coleman, and some of that stuff just started to slip out, right? How would they respond to that, right? Or if once you assess that, you play something like really crazy, and then the guys are like, okay, what's going on here? Okay, then you make your assessment from there. But if you get some type of response, then okay, now you're off and running, right? Now you're telling the story, right? Of that moment, or some fictitious story, something that you're imagining. That doesn't really exist, but you want to communicate this feeling. This is the beauty of playing music. You have the freedom to do all this. You're regular Spielberg over here. Whenever you get ready to, you can like tell the story of whatever you feel is necessary for that moment. Whatever particular proclivities you have in life that nobody would never know about if you didn't communicate and work through that feeling that way, some some of the movies that I like, I mean, people would just never know. Like I have like a cheesy, like weird, I like bad movies. Like I like Nick Cage, right? I like Steven Seagal and stuff like that. Like most people that know me would never think that, but I only mention that because everybody has these type of things, right? And you can incorporate all that into your music. And I often do. Like just some of that, silliness and playful nature that I hear in like a guy like Steve Swallow or Thelonious Monk, these guys just have this like whimsical, childlike, playful nature to their music, and I think it's wonderful that they're able to like get in touch with the art like that. You know, I mean, even a guy that I mean, like Wynton Marsalis, everybody kind of looks at him as being like really serious, or at least I did for a long time. But then you examine what he does and the freedom in which he allows everybody around him to work with. You know, it's really special. He has like a really, really childlike nature to his playing, which is, I mean, that's ultimately what I'm most drawn to. Like, I like Oscar Peterson, I like Charlie Parker. You know, if we're just talking about jazz, I like music that, you know, I like all music that communicates effectively some idea that effectively like tells a story, right? But I'm ultimately drawn to the happy stuff, like Gene Harris, Oscar Peterson, Charlie Parker. I mean, even like, I mean, Nick Payton, you know, his music just sounds like abundantly happy, you know, to me. Yeah, Benny Green, he's another one. Brian Blade, you know, yeah, all these guys. I mean, if you're a seasoned professional, then you know exactly who I'm talking about. But if you're someone who is just getting into jazz music, and some of these names are unfamiliar to you, definitely go and check them out. There's so much stuff on those old Crisscross albums that you can get. You know, I know this is a Young Lions master session, but you can get in there. You can do some old Lions too. We will refurbish some of the old Lions. We'll get them swinging and get their courage back up so they can go back out there, right? So let me do an example of how I would say. Okay, I'll just play. I'll play Stella by Starlight, right? And it's tough to tell a different story over Stella because the name, the implied story is within the name, right? And so what does Stella look like? What does she sound like? What is she wearing, right? Let's try to do that. Let's try to do an example of Stella. It's just the first thing that came to mind, right? You can take your time, man. You can just use a little patience. I mean, there's no rush, man. You're not on the clock. It's not a race. You just kind of let ideas develop naturally. You could, okay, so like if you wanted to like communicate a particular idea, like I just thought about a line, like, okay, so you can mutate a line, right? So you can go, right? If you can work chromatically through there, you just have a figure that you want. Like if you have to like see it, you can't just do that. Like if you take a figure like that and then you see like a through line, like, oh, if I can work chromatically down there, down to that, right? So when it does that 2/5 to F, so you can go sorry. No. Right? You take that one idea, you start to mutate it, and then, okay, so now you have that figure. Just start working it around. Take it out of the context of the song and just work that around, you know what I mean? Right? So you have that one idea. You can just start moving around. Like if you want to play like a cadenza, you're like playing an intro to a tune, you can have like one figure in mind and just kind of mutate that. Like another figure that comes to mind, that there's a thing that Coltrane and Sonny Rollins, Sonny Stitt, a lot of guys use in bebop. It's like it's whole pattern, moving around in fourths and fifths. So they got like, I think it's like a Yusuf Lateef thing. I think he's the one that did it, right? So you have this idea, right? Right? You work different ideas like that. Just pick a figure and start working around the horn, right? This is right in line with this musical storytelling idea. Because a lot of times, like if you're not playing, I sort of got away from the whole idea of the shapes and things like that. But the idea is like when you're telling a story, you have the character introduction, you have the scene, you have the setting, you kind of have like an overall vibe that you want to come with, right? And then you have to be like consistent with that. You have to like stay with, because if you have like a movie that starts off as like a thriller and then it ends up being like a touchy-feely piece where they just talk, and you know what I mean? Like if it starts off as an action thriller, you're going to expect them to continue kind of along that line. Like not like there's you're required to, but there is a certain weight of expectation. That's another thing that a lot of good musical storytellers use. You can play things, you can do figures, shapes that have a weight of there's a certain weight of expectation for the next thing, right? It's just first thing that comes to mind, right? There's a certain weight of expectation for what is and should come next after what I play, right? 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 So you can do things like that. You can like play little things, but don't finish. Like leave it open ended, right? Like you can. Um, I was trying to think of a more effective way to do that, but hopefully you get the gist. There's a certain weight of expectation that that comes along with a lot of things. You can make implications musically, and right. And I'm talking about all this to suggest the reality of you being able to literally tell a story while you're playing. And I believe that once you get to this place of just conceptualizing the music in a way that is not so linear, that just not so mechanical. And of course, you have to have done the work. You have to have put in quite a bit of time prior to that point in order to disregard all of these things, so to speak, and still effectively satisfy all the requirements to playing, good music, as I think most of us understand it, right? So I don't want to suggest that you can just pick up your instrument and just fantasize about whatever you want to, and it's just all going to work out. I don't mean to suggest that at all, but I mean to say that it is possible for you to incorporate experiences from your own life, from your own family, from your own likenesses, like your favorite color. And that's how you begin to tell your story, your musical story, right? When you truly start to connect with the music and you incorporate, I would, just anything that you like, whatever you like, whether it's food, whether it's travel, whether it's just community, whether there's some spiritual thing that you just cling to, but like for you to truly like incorporate that when you're playing is completely possible. And I think it's immensely important to you being able to tell a story effectively in your own words, not like regurgitating something that you heard, or that, oh man, I heard this lick. I am going to show them when I get to the jam session, I'm going to blow them away. Right. That's not really you don't need other people to be there to do that. Right. You just do that because you want to do that. I just think it goes against the whole principle and the intended idea of music and its role in society. I think it's crucial. Like they used to like look at musicians as like doctors, right? You would heal people, right? I mean, so the whole exercise is to like share, not necessarily like it's not always the other people will help tell the story along with you. It's a community thing. It's not, you may set the table, you may like introduce an idea or introduce a character, figuratively like introduce a musical idea or a particular vibe. Like it just seems like all the songs that you're playing that night, they just kind of they want to be up tempo, or they were just kind of inching the tempos up a little bit, right? That's the vibe, right? So you can incorporate that into whatever you're doing, but just try to be a little bit more creative about it. I know a lot of people like get bogged down, or they just or maybe I shouldn't say that. I know some people get bogged down. As artists, we all have our moments where our creative juices is flowing a little bit more free than others. But this is definitely some of the things that I use to really get in touch with what's happening, and to tell a story, and not to try to, because the notes themselves, that's not the music. Like you breathing life into the music comes by way of like shaping, each individual phrase, each note. There's a lot of mysticism that occurs on stage with other musicians. I think most of which we don't quite yet understand. But through trying to like visualize other things in your life that don't have anything to do with music and try to incorporate that with the things that you are saying, I think will ultimately just speed up your growth. Like the information that you process, you have some song or some music material that you're working on. There'll be things within that. It just happens naturally, right? Like different chord structures, different sounds. They make you think of something, right? It's like if I hear a diminished idea, right? If I hear something like I always think of like the old train robbers, right? Like those old black and white movies that were like when they silent films. That's what you should check out. Go back and check out some silent films, right? When they didn't have any dialogue or anything, they actually used to play the music to, or some of the old Tom and Jerry, the Hanna-Barbera cartoons and all that stuff. They used to have music all through that stuff. Maybe this is like therapeutic for me too, right? I'm touching on something that I never really even thought about, right? A lot of the old silent movies, like there was like one guy, they had a piano player back in the back, right? And he would actually just play the music. He would play what he thought the music sounded like. And I think it's just a wonderful concept, right? I mean, it happens all the time. Like when you see a movie, like they create the movie, they send it off to the musician and they're just like, okay, tell me, like play something with the, like, what this sounds like. It occurs all the time. But if you're playing, if you're improvising, and you're telling your story, you're composing in the moment, be more free about that. Actually have something, in mind that you're trying to communicate. I also don't mean to suggest that you're just up on the bandstand, like wandering off and like daydreaming and stuff the whole time. But in sort of in a way, I am like, as long as you're connected and you're in the music, to use elements that are not in that moment, I think is like immensely effective and useful to really good musical storytelling, right? You'll think about it, it has a feel to it. It's something that I practice, right? So when any good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Like one of the things that I love, like when I'm performing with my band, I love the endings to songs. Like the end of a song, it's just like if you leave, I mean, you could have all kinds of errors or things, and maybe the arrangement that you had you guys were supposed to do this, and it was 3 hits after the second. You miss all that. But if you land that plane and you bring that sucker in nice and smooth and glide on in to a beautiful ending, nobody cares about any of that. Or that could be the cherry and the sprinkles on an otherwise magical performance. You bring it in, you land that sucker in really nice. That's just my, like, I really enjoyed the end of a tune. Everybody just kind of, we get that retardando at the end and everybody kind of slows at the same pace. It's like nobody talks about it. It's even if you rehearsed it 5 times, you still have to like agree to like slow or decrease your tempo at the same pace. And I think there's just something really, really magical about that. And should be, you got to pay attention to all this other stuff. It requires cooperation. And one thing I would suggest to anybody, no matter how much, if you're practicing, however many hours you put in all kinds of time, that's great. But you got to go out and play with other people. That's the only thing that makes it real. You could think you're great and you're making strides, but it's a lot different feel. Like playing the Jamie Abersols or any play alongs, this stuff is great. I do it all the time. But the real, meat and potato, so to speak, or where the rubber meets the road, how many more idioms could I use, is when you go out and you play with other people, you put into practice all these all these things, these strategies that you have. Looks great on paper, right? But in practice, like in the application of all these different things, is where you're really going to see what works, what doesn't work. And believe it or not, every time you play, there is some growth there. You grow. Musically, you grow. If you allow yourself to. If you just want to go in and like play your lick, I got my lick, I got it off, I'm good. I'm going to come back next time, I'll play my lick again, and maybe a little faster, and I'll set them on fire. Right. So before I go too far along in here, Mike, is there anybody that's hopped in there? Do we have any questions or anybody that wants to has any comments or is wondering about how they can be a better storyteller?
Actually, we didn't have any that popped in just now, but I like the fact that, you're incorporating listening to different artists as well, and you're telling me how that could influence your storytelling as well. The being creative, you really took us through even you spoke about colors, and I've heard musicians mention that, like, man, when they think of blue or when they think of purple, they're speaking on that aspect through that instrument. So that was amazing. Here's another thing I took from what you said. You played a phrase, but you didn't end it, and it kind of left that audience in suspense, like, oh, what's next? So
right.
We always talk about adding space in your music and really interacting with our listeners. And man, I thought that was powerful right there. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are very, very serious aspects of storytelling. So when did you realize, here's a question right here.
Okay.
How important that storytelling aspect was. At what point of your playing, when you got out of the technical aspect and you were out there really soloing, was it when you heard somebody, a specific instrumentalist play, and it dawned on you like, man, I need to home in on that? Or was it just something you kind of developed somewhere in the middle and then you homed on it a little bit more?
Yeah, it was something that I developed. It was something that literally I used to sleep to the Charlie Parker with strings, and there was like a compact jazz, like Bird on Verve. There was a couple Charlie Parker CDs that back when I used to put a CD player on repeat, and with a pair of headphones, I would literally sleep to that every night. And Bird being just a ridiculous storyteller, but him doing it, Nancy Wilson, Johnny Hodges, there's so many people. Paul Gonsalves, like I remember that really long solo that he took with Duke and Newport in 61 or 63, something like that. I had seen it done. Coltrane taking these, 30-minute versions of impressions and stuff like this. And, even Joe Lovano talking about tones, shapes, and colors. And just countless musicians and singers that I heard telling these stories. Or even if I didn't know that they were if that was actually what they were doing, I just, maybe when I was younger, I thought it was like great music that I enjoyed, but I don't know if I fully appreciated. As a younger player, I was drawn to certain things, and so Charlie Parker, I was attracted to him. I have a big Charlie Parker picture right by my bed. That guy holds a pretty coveted spot with me. But I heard his music, but I don't know if I appreciated his music the way that I do now. I was drawn to the sound and chops and stuff like that. The same thing with Brecker. A lot of people, Johnny Griffin. I was blown away by the chops. And then even Benny Golson, like when he was younger, like you hear him when he's older, you would never think that he was a chopster, like just a technical wizard. But yeah, those are the things that I like. I was drawn to different things when I was younger. I don't know if I fully appreciated uh, the storytelling ability that so many of these great artists have. Like even Frank Sinatra, some of the stuff that he does, I mean, it'll just take you away. Miles Davis, talk about a storyteller. Some of that stuff he did with Gil Evans, Sketches of Spain, Miles Smiles, Quiet Nights, right? Oh man, just take you on a voyage. You come back, after every song, you just take a deep breath, right? So I guess the long-winded version of answering the question is like, for me, yeah, that my ability to tell a story just kind of came with time. I think that, like I said, when I was younger, I mean, I'm talking about even as late as like the last 10 years, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's been a great deal of maturity in my playing just because of the type of stuff that I focus on nowadays. Like I can still play fast, but I don't necessarily always feel the need to. Like I think that I understand and appreciate the value of taking your time and being patient. I've never really taken a lot of formal lessons, but I took an actual lesson with Seamus Blake. This was probably back in 2008, 2009, somewhere around in there, and we were just hanging out at his apartment, and just like a couple of cats, we were just playing over some tunes and stuff like that, some tracks, some episodes, and we were kind of just trading back and forth, or with no tracks and just playing, and because he was just like, okay, well, the lesson was us playing, but he also wanted to play just as like we couldn't just sit down for the lesson, and he just started telling me stuff. He wants to see if how I play and what he feels as if I should hear. Like what information can I give this cat? Because he's not going to start telling me about some stuff that I already need, or that I already have, or try to communicate an idea to someone that they're not ready for. So we play for a little while, and he's just like, "Yeah, man, you can obviously play. I don't know what I can tell you, but if I could say anything, I would just say work on your altissimo and just slow down. It's not a race. When I say slow down, like slow down when you're practicing to the point that it feels like you're dramatically, drastically too slow, right? And just this whole idea of the practice and the exercise of just slowing yourself down, you begin to see how to use it. I mean, because when you're playing, you might play and you feel one way about it, and you go back and listen to the recording. You might have thought it was great, and you listen back and like, that was that stuff that I was doing. You might have played some fancy stuff, but it just kind of missed the mark. Or you play and you really feel as if, I had that one thing I wanted to do, it and it didn't come off right, and this, that, and the other. And then you listen back and then you realize that, well, there was a clear through line in everything that you were doing. You effectively did what you needed to do. You told the story, right? And so, yeah, I mean, when I realized that I was capable of doing it, I was elated. Like I was like, man, I can do this. Like because to me, that's like the most difficult piece to get. That's like one of the final little nuggets as a musician, as an aspiring musician, that you hope to get. Like, okay, I've developed my own voice and like I have a recognizable sound, and all these things need constant maintenance. Just like your automobile, you have to take it in and get oil and stuff like that. You have to constantly do maintenance on yourself, on your fingerings, on your embouchure, on all your technical stuff. You have to constantly be working and doing maintenance on it. It's not like you just achieved a certain level of proficiency and you're good for the rest of your life. No, at that point, it becomes even more necessary for you to go back in and do the maintenance every single day, if possible. So yeah, I mean, just this whole concept of musical storytelling was really important to me. Or it has been. I mean, I wanted to talk about this subject today because, yeah, I mean, when earlier on, and I think it's true of a lot of young musicians, they don't really understand. I think it's like apparent in any musician's development. If you listen to, Ernie Watts or like any great sax player from their youth, and you contrast that against some of their later works, there's a noticeable difference. It's not that they get better, but there's a certain level of maturity and pace. You don't have that same youthful exuberance and excitement. You might still have. I still have the excitement. I'm 42 now. I still have the excitement. Every time I take my horn out of the case, I still have a lot of fun doing it. I feel very fortunate and blessed to be in this position, and I still get excited. But like, yeah, I mean, you slow down, you appreciate things a little bit more. I mean, even in moments when the situation requires some fast-paced stuff, and you just like, yeah, we're just really getting after it, and it's high energy. Like, I mean, the last time I did the John Coltrane concert, I'm going to be doing again over here at HCC on the 3rd. There was a lot of times where, yeah, the Coltrane's music, I've been, working on this music. It's really demanding. It requires a lot of energy, right? And sometimes a lot of notes. But it's always in context. Like, there's never a moment where you're just still out there on the edge, flailing away, and you look back and everybody is clearly retreated, right? And you're just still out there. When you're younger, you might do those kind of things, right? But it's a matter of everything coming in its own way and at its own time. And when it's done, right? Like, you don't really force the issue of more activity. Sometimes it's necessary, and sometimes maybe the band's dragging a little bit or whatever's happening, the tempo's dragging it, or nobody, you guys been working 14 nights in a row and you just ain't really. And so sometimes the band may need a spark. You may need to, kick it into high gear for a minute, but it's not done for effect. That's done out of necessity, right? That's for a very specific reason. And even within that, you're telling the story, right? And so just the experience, the way that you look at things, the older you get, the more experience you get. It's like, man, you want to do well. Being successful feels good. Like, putting a smile on somebody else's face feels good. Having your fellow musicians trust you and believe in you feels good. Doing a gig and then going home and then having them call you again, that feels good. You know what I mean? So these are the type of things that you start to focus on instead of like trying to set the world on fire with your licks and your activity, and you just learn this new melodic phase. I think it's just a matter of age and maturity. But certainly that's at the forefront of my focus. It's very rare that I'll start soloing and I'll think about like, I don't know. It's just like it's not specific. I do my best to try to like get out of the way. Like, I mean, get out of the way of myself. You know what I mean? Like, instead of me trying to force my will or what I'll just play. I'll first be listening. To try to see how. Okay, like I literally, if you're having a conversation with somebody, right? You want to see the type of feedback that you get is going to determine the next thing that you say, right? So I immediately want to engage. I mean, if it's both musically or depending on the situation. Now, if we're in the studio and we're in a booth and we can't see each other, it's a little bit different. But if we're on stage, I'm doing everything I can to connect with you and see where you at, to kind of check you a little bit. Hey, hey, come here. What if I do this? Boom, boom, boom. Right? And then whatever you do back, that's going to determine what I do next, right? And that's when you begin to tell a story. And now you got an ensemble. Now you're doing something. But if now, just right now, I'm just talking to the horn players. If y'all get up in front of the band and you just say like, hey, this is my time to shine, that ain't going to work. They ain't back there. Look, they're not your servants. They're not just working or so you can get off. Like that's it's an ensemble, right? And like you have to keep in mind, like, especially as horn players, we don't play all the time. Like if we're playing in a jazz context, there's a couple horn players. We play the head, boop, boop, and then the other horn player takes one first, and then maybe the piano player takes one, and then you go. The vibe is already kind of established, right? So you got to, it's like playing double dutch. You got to get in there when it's time. Like you got to come in on time when it's time and get in there and participate. You can't just jump in there and lay that, like the whole thing is going to fall apart. So you have to be really, really mindful. This musical storytelling concept is something for you to help you like get out of this like linear approach to soloing. But a big part of that is your fellow musicians. You really gotta be mindful and attentive of what's happening around you. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do, whether you're playing as a soloist in a combo or a small ensemble, or you're a horn player is playing in a section, and you have to blend. And being out front is maybe not so important. You want to blend with the other voices, then there's an immense amount of cooperation that's necessary whenever you're doing this. So you can't just, it's musical storytelling, not musical pontificating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, answer Jeremy, man. This has been, a phenomenal session today with you. We want to thank you for opening up, and you played for us. You shared some wisdom and some knowledge with us, and I just want to remind everybody: go out and share what you heard today. The quality of the content that you're receiving here. And guess what? It's all free. I mean, where can you find this type of expertise from the people that are on the stages and are in the classrooms teaching it right here free? Well, you can find it here at www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. And so go to that website, check out the past archives. You'll be able to check this one out as well. Go back and play and take your notes. And we're also open for maybe some future topic suggestions, or if you just want to give us some feedback and say, you know what, I love that session that Jeremy Carter gave today, and we want to hear much more of him. Just email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com. We would love to hear from you. I'm your guest host today, and this has been the super fantastic educator/education major saxophonist, worldwide known Jeremy Carter. And until next time, everyone, keep it swinging. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.